Like I said, we'd be right back. It's exactly 2:15 Eastern Standard, so I thought I'd just get right into this lightning talk. This talk is going to be about stakeholder management. This is one of the most common issues that I come across with clients, and it's just something that I think is absolutely manageable and it's a solvable problem. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Joe Crespo. I'm the Director of Accounts at Aten Design Group. I've been building websites for 20 years, and 7 of them have been with Aten. Aten works with mission-driven organizations like the City of Raleigh. We are award-winning City of Raleigh website. It's a Webby and Communicator Award. Super exciting about that, but I digress. I'm going to move on to, sorry, I'm a little loopy. Aten provides a full-service digital agency. We provide user engagement strategy. Who are your users? What do you need from them? What do they need from you? What are the conversions that you can drive them to? We provide accessible and responsive design that reinforce your brand and also your message. And finally, we provide open source development, primarily with Drupal, WordPress, React, and Gatsby. With respect to Drupal, and since this is DrupalCon, it's worth noting that our Drupal development team are Acquia certified, and including we have 2 Acquia certified Drupal Grand Masters. As I mentioned, Joe Crespo, Director of Accounts. Let me tell you a little bit about my history. 20 years ago, when I first started out, I started out as a graphic designer, quickly pivoted to a web designer, then I became a web developer, then a project manager. And for the last 3+ years at Aten, I've been doing sales. I've been doing sales. I actually really love doing this. But one thing about this chart that I think illustrates is that I've spent the vast majority of my career above the waterline with respect to a project. Meaning, as a developer or designer, I've always thought about a project as a timeline from kickoff to launch. And this is wrong. This is just the part above the waterline. You know, ever since I've stepped into this role, I read RFPs, I respond to proposals, I put together project plans with clients. I know that when we are talking, typically this project was incepted a long time ago. It's oftentimes by the time I become a part of the conversation, they've been thinking about this project for a year, 2 years, or even 5 years. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about the part of the project below the waterline, the part from inception to kickoff. The fact of the matter is that you can't set stakeholder expectations at kickoff. It's too late. You can't do it at launch. It's way too late. You have to do it early, and before the project launches or even starts. I have a blog post and session on RFP writing. This is whether or not you're going through a formal request for proposal process or just needing to put together a document. This blog post and accompanying session will talk through how to organize that document to find the best possible partners. Talk about your history as an organization, the project history, the history of your team, scope, timeline, budget, the iron triangle. All of that stuff is covered in that RFP post. And also love talking about it. So if you want to put something on my calendar, just go to aten.io/meet and let's meet and we can talk all about RFP writing. But today we're talking about the most important part of the RFP process or the pre-project process, and that is stakeholder management. The truth is, no matter what your KPIs are, your key performance indicators, whatever metrics you're using to measure success, the satisfaction of your stakeholders will actually be the determinant as to whether or not a project was successful. Now, you need to get buy-in from the stakeholders about what you're doing, what's important, what's a priority. And that buy-in is in tension with other parts of the project. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Stakeholder buy-in is a simple formula. It's stakeholder input plus stakeholder feedback equals stakeholder buy-in. If you are going to your stakeholders and learning what their needs are, what their pain points are, what their aspirations are, and then showing them the work, they are going to feel like they're a part of this project. There's a great quote from the co-founder of Mule Design. And I believe they said, there's no design so great, it makes you feel good about being left out of the process. And so you really need to have your stakeholders on board with your project. However, like I mentioned, this is in tension with the other parts of the project that absolutely need your attention, and that is the timeline. Projects are like sharks. They are either swimming or drowning. You absolutely have to keep pushing them forward. You have to keep pushing them forward. But stakeholder input, stakeholder feedback, that takes time. That takes time, not just in terms of the hours of putting together, devising the emails and synthesizing their feedback. It's not just that. It's the calendar days of waiting for that feedback to arrive. And so in order for you to, and if you don't plan for this, what happens is you'll get to an artifact like a design comp, for example, that needs to be sent around, get approval. If you wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks for the feedback to come in, your project is going to stall. That's problematic. Your project loses velocity. That's a budget risk. Your project timeline, it's a slip for slip. Every week your project slips. Every week your launch slips. And then in addition to the timeline issue and the budget issue is the scope issue, is that if you didn't get the feedback you didn't get the input from the stakeholders before the project launches, and now you're showing them work during the project, what happens is they're now adding scope to your project and putting additional burdens on your project. So in order for you to be able to manage this successfully, you need to work that feedback into your timeline. I don't expect that last sentence to be revelatory to anyone. We all know we've got to reach out to the stakeholders. We've got to work them into the timeline. It's not it's not a question of whether or not this is important. It's a question of how do we do this? And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this lightning talk. First, there is a framework for thinking of your stakeholders. It's a RACI framework. Specifically, this is an acronym for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Responsible, who's actually doing a particular task, who's creating that design comp, who's creating that wireframe. Also responsible, who's reviewing that design comp, who's reviewing that wireframe, who's accountable, what happens if it doesn't get delivered. Consulted, who within the organization who do you need to get that input and feedback from? And finally, who's informed, who are the people that just need to know about the project? Now, this RACI framework is specific to your organization. I can't sit here from this chair or from 30,000 feet and tell you who is assigned to what category in your organization. But it is really important as you think about the stakeholders and your organization organizing your project, it's important for you to assign these various letters to the various individuals you'll be working with. So who is R, who is A, who is C, who is I? And by the way, they may differ from different tasks, and and a single individual may have one or more responsibilities within the RACI framework. Second, survey your stakeholders. And I don't mean survey them at kickoff or after kickoff with a partner once the project starts. I mean, survey them prior to the engagement. And questions that are really pertinent to ask at this time are, what are your pain points on the site? What are your aspirations for the new site? What's some functionality you'd like to see on the new site? And just as important, because remember, a website is a digital product that you are maintaining, and product ownership means not only adding features, but removing features that no longer serve a purpose. So asking your stakeholders, hey, what's on the site that you never use anymore? That's really helpful for you to understand what's important to them, what's not important to them, what they're aspiring to do. Also ask them about other competitor sites, or, we work with nonprofits, so other sites that are comparative, and also sites that provide inspiration and why. These are great ways to get insight into your stakeholders, but also set the expectation that this is just the first survey. One thing I've discovered is that when there's been a lot of internal discovery and then a partner like Aten comes on board, what happens is that we want to do some discovery, and there's a little bit of discovery fatigue if the ground hasn't been prepared for us. So it's really important when you send out a survey to let them know this is just the first of several that are coming their way. The other thing about the survey that's really helpful is that it helps you see who is engaged, who responded to the survey right now, who provided fulsome answers to the entire thing, Who's disinterested? Who gave one monosyllabic, like adolescent answers or didn't respond at all? And then finally, who is supposed to be engaged, but acting like they're disinterested, like a busy executive sponsor, somebody who's paying for it, but they have a lot of things on their plate. It's really helpful by doing this survey. You can get a sense of what's important to them, what's not important to them, what's engaging them, and who's going to be engaged throughout the project. We're not done organizing the stakeholders. If you're talking about a fairly small stakeholder group, it's good to organize them by role. Subject matter experts, editors, marketing, communications folks, and leadership are really just 4 common roles that I've come across again and again. I think there are other common roles of folks that we work with are either in enrollment in high schools, or in colleges, or at or researchers at a nonprofit, or the development team, meaning the fundraising team at a nonprofit, or the development team, meaning the part of the communications marketing team or IT folks that are managing the website. The roles are really specific to your project. That's not something, again, I can tell you from 30,000 feet, but organizing them by role is really helpful. It's also helpful to organize them by department. And this is great for if you're to step away by role. And if you're working with a large organization, or you're part of a large organization, to organize all of the points of contact, one point of contact per department, program, or unit, or however the federation works in your organization. And of course, not every department is created equally. So you're not going to, and sometimes you'll have a point of contact who might not be the best person. And in that case, for mid-size organizations, it might be helpful to organize by department and then by role within that department. It's worth noting that not all departments are created equally, so not all roles will be reflected in every single department. So again, from inception to kickoff, put the RACI diagram on your folks, send out the surveys, find out what's of interest to them, find out who is interested in this project, and then finally organize them by persona. This is just like if for a product would have a persona, a series of personas that identify your audiences, your project needs to have personas to identify your stakeholders. Okay, let's pivot for the last 90 seconds to the other part, the part above the waterline that you need to plan for managing your stakeholders. If you've done all the organization beforehand, afterwards actually going to be, it goes from being nebulous to being actually fairly simple to manage. First, plan it for informal meetings. These are great for making the work visible to a large organization. Town halls, brown bag lunches. We did this with the city of Raleigh. We did this with History Colorado. History Colorado is a quasi-public, public-private organization. They run 9 museums, dozens of archaeological sites. They are also the Historic Society for the state of Colorado. Making sure we got all of those stakeholders around was really, really a tough to organize. But a brown bag lunch, dead simple. We were able to go in, show the work, bring everybody up to speed. It's great for all of those informed folks. I've got 30 seconds. I'm about to wrap this thing up. And finally, schedule the key stakeholders, the people that are engaged, that have a particular interest. When you're working through the project timeline, as you're working through it with either your team or a partner, and you're thinking about when to bring them in, it's really helpful to think about, as you're working with your team or partner, to think about all of the deliverables and the schedule of those deliverables, and then work those people into the very first working meetings. Having this kind of roadmap timeline is super helpful to make the work visible and make everyone accountable. And now, again, you're going to see most of these will be, you'll have a very, very bright line of sight and clear line of sight on the earlier deliverables, and it'll start getting fuzzier later. So you'll have to manage this throughout the entirety of the engagement. Again, I am thrilled to talk about this all day. My name is Joe Crespo. I work at Aten Design Group. Happy to talk. I'm heading on over to our booth. We're going to be doing some more presentations over there about process and case studies. Love to see you there. We'll talk soon.